Brick by brick, my fellow Palantir citizens. Brick by brick. Today, I want to talk about a company, Palantir Technologies, that I personally am very bullish on. But it's a very tricky company to understand. And so I really hope that you guys stick around for the whole video because I'm going to jump into explaining each one of their three main offerings. Foundry, which is the operating system for modern enterprise. Gotham, which is the operating system for global decision-making, and this is helping a lot of governments with their anti-terrorism efforts, and it stops wars from escalating. It's a really impressive, amazing technology. And the other one is Apollo, and that is the operating system for continuous delivery. So Palantir Technologies, it was founded in 2003. It's headquartered in Denver, Colorado, and it had a couple of co-founders, but the two that I want you to know is Peter Thiel, who's the billionaire venture capitalist. He's worth almost $40 billion in net worth, which is insane. He was the co-founder of PayPal. He was the first outside investor in Facebook. And then the other co-founder, who is still the CEO, is Alex Karp. And this guy is really impressive in his own right. He is not a businessman by trade and by education. He's actually a philosopher. And that's really interesting because he has a really interesting take on the big picture of things. He's a straight shooter, and we'll get into all that later in the video. So before we jump into the nitty and gritty of these three main offerings, I want to point out some pros and cons to Palantir Technologies as a stock. So one of the pros is they have a proven product. They are used by governments all over the world. They're now in the commercial sector. A lot of companies are using them. They came out with Foundry for builders, and their second cohort is impressive. I'll cover all that a little bit later. So they do have amazing partnerships, and they don't care about political correctness. Now, this can be a con as well, and I'll discuss in a second. But why I think it's a pro is because a lot of the Silicon Valley companies, they stay away from anything that's not politically correct. And so they're not going to work with governments like Palantir does. So what it means by them not being politically correct is they're okay working with ICE, even if it is controversial with immigration, but they never deal with China. They understand that AI is the future, and whoever has the strongest, most powerful AI in the world is going to run the future, and they want that to be America and their allies, and they do not beat around the bush about it. And just really briefly, some of the cons to keep in mind is they do have a lot of large clients, but they don't have too many clients. They only have several hundred clients. So if one of their large clients leaves, or for some reason the contract goes belly up, this is going to be devastating to their bottom line, at least in the short term. Another potential con is controversy. So maybe data laws. Let's say there's a leak or a hack, or it's seen as they're doing something that's not kosher. They might get a lot of backlash for that, and then some of their commercial clients might leave just to save face and for PR reasons. The other potential con is blowback for some of the government contracts they have. So let's say the Royal Navy goes and starts a war somewhere, and Palantir is involved in the Royal Navy. That might be frowned upon, again, by the commercial sector of what they're doing. I know some of this sounds outlandish, but a lot of companies, bad PR is bad for the bottom line. And finally, diluting the stock. So Palantir does have some history of diluting the stock in order to raise capital. Personally, I'm okay with that if they're using that raised capital to grow and to make it to the next level. Because when a company's in the growth stages, it's good to fund it, and it's good for them to get that extra funding through stocks, but not too much. They don't want to scare all the investors away, and they don't want to lose the respect and trust of the investor by diluting the stock. But that is always a risk with a company like Palantir that is just starting the growth trend. Palantir can be a very interesting growth stock story, and this might be the first or second chapter of a very long epic tale. So I'm very excited, but without further ado, this week's episode of The Bulls, the Bears, and the Bats, let's get into it. So the purpose of Foundry is essentially to gain a deeper understanding of the business operations based on data and models using data gathering tools and data analytics tools. It's very customizable to virtually all industries and business models. The purpose of Foundry is for it to function as the central decision support infrastructure. It maps all data into an easily understood framework that helps business people see how to run efficient and lean operations and where to place emphasis and focus. So a good example would be a manufacturing company that is seeking to optimize its supply chain to make it more effective. Palantir refers to Foundry as like the digital twin of the business.
Collecting data means nothing if you don't know how to analyze it and how to base good decision making off of it. Remember that aside from customizability, they also use machine learning to make the AI smarter and even more tailored to the unique business model it serves. So Palantir created Foundry for Builders, which is targeting smaller businesses and startups. So under Foundry for Builders, Palantir licenses Foundry to startups under a subscription-based model. And this is great. You know, if you watch this channel, that I love subscription-based models because it means recurring revenue. And that is great for the bottom line and for consistent earnings. The first companies to benefit were connected to the Palantir alumni, and Foundry for Builders now includes other early stage companies. The second cohort of Foundry for Builders companies includes the following. So they basically released all of these companies are now using Foundry for Builders. And some of these are very impressive companies. I'm going to link this article. It's from businesswire.com, and you could click on each company if you want to know more details. You can read about it there. Okay, so remember that we mentioned there's 3 main platforms to Palantir, so that was Foundry. Now let's take a deeper dive into Gotham, which is the operating system for global decision making. It's artificial intelligence for the defense industry, for analytical decision making, for disaster relief, for anti-terrorism efforts, for preventing escalation of wars. And speaking of that, I watched their demo on Gotham, and they basically use the example of a Chinese military pretending to do a routine exercise, but then the system notices a bunch of ships gathering too close together and military activity at the Taiwanese port, suggesting that there may be ulterior motives in place and there might be a possibility of a blockade by the Chinese. And so with the help of the AI, the artificial intelligence behind Gotham, the US is able to decide on which machine or person generated course of action they prefer to take based on previously tested simulations. And so they go through the options in the example of what the US wants to do. We can send an aerial help with planes, we can send a ship over, we can do this and that. And then as they go through the different options, they choose the one with the highest probability of success and the lowest risks, which ends up being sending a US ship over to monitor the situation. And upon seeing this, the other ships disband and disperse. So the Chinese, they see the American ship coming, they see that there's support and they know what they're trying to do, so they disperse and the conflict is avoided. Now, defense industry partners include the Royal Army, the US Army, the US Navy, the CIA. These are giant contracts, and that's the other thing that concerns people, is that some of these contracts are so huge and so crucial to Palantir's bottom line that if something goes bottom up, or if they roll with another company, so let's say the US Navy chooses another company, then that is really going to affect the revenue stream and eventually the profits of Palantir. So another thing I want to point out is there was a recent article, so this is October 4th, 2021, where the NIH continues collaboration with Palantir Technologies to support COVID-19 research. So Palantir has been very instrumental in the way that a lot of countries dealt with COVID. So this contract is for Palantir to keep supporting the National COVID Cohort Collaborative, and it has a potential value of $59.5 million over 2 years, with an initial task order for $7.9 million over the first 5 months. Now, something I want to point out is that before Palantir went commercial and is offering this to startups and different types of businesses, you have to realize that this AI was all created, tested with the biggest government agencies from all over the world. And this is important to note because government agencies, they have really deep pockets. Their funding is pretty much endless. And so they paid Palantir to essentially do all the R&D for Palantir to now go and sell these products, these services, this AI to commercial clients. And so all of this is to say that there is a really steep barrier of entry for another company to come in and do what Palantir does. And Palantir is way ahead of the game. They're very unique. And when I look at investing in things, I always go for a company where it's really, really difficult for another company to come in and compete with because they have competitive advantages. And one of the competitive advantages is that they have been working on their AI for many, many years. And they had some very large clients that were funding a lot of money for them to keep innovating the AI, to keep doing research and development for the AI, and to make sure that it works seamlessly and efficiently. And it seems to me that once Palantir felt that they really got it down and they had a high-end product that was in high demand, That's when they took their very effective product and decided to go commercial with it so that they can help companies thrive, but also so that they can grow the company to be a global company and make a lot of money for investors and for themselves. So let's now look at the third platform that Palantir offers, and that is Apollo. Palantir Apollo is the continuous delivery software that powers the SaaS or software as a system platforms Foundry and Gotham in the public cloud and beyond. Apollo is basically the heartbeat behind these systems, providing both speed and most up-to-date features. So as Palantir states on their company website, that the competitive advantage is that most SaaS companies only run in the public cloud, and they're not like most SaaS companies. Their software operates seamlessly across on-premise data centers, classified networks, embedded edge devices, and a constellation of hybrid clouds. And so in a simple sentence, all that is to say is that Apollo enables continuous deployment across all the environments. Like we said before, they are the heartbeat of the SaaS systems. The one thing that I kind of admire about Palantir is they don't beat around the bush or care about being modest or politically correct. They're going after it. They're going after the customers that other Silicon Valley companies will not touch for PR reasons. So as I mentioned, Alex Kemp, their CEO, he is brash. He often speaks kindly about retail investors, but he rips apart Wall Street suits. He praises the retail investors for not having such a short-term focus that he feels that Wall Street suits do. He's on record as saying that Wall Street is one of the most destructive, corrosive attributes of an otherwise interesting and largely functioning system. Ouch. I love the brutal honesty, I love the forward thinking, and this is why I'm very interested in this company and I am an investor. So I own 510 shares of Palantir. I purchased it at a price of about $18.65. I did that in mid-May, and I'll cover in a second why I purchased it and what I plan to do with it. And as you can see, I'm already up over 30%. I put less than 10 grand in, so it was around $9,500 was the price I paid for the investment, and currently it sits at 12.5 grand, which is over $3,000 that I've already made on the investment. So if we come over here and we look at the technicals, you can see that ever since around February 25th, the stock has basically just been trading sideways. But you can see here that ever since around mid-May, it's on an uptrend. And I actually purchased it on this dip here. And I always emphasize to buy stocks on dips because you're much more likely to see a better profit moving forward. So I purchased it around mid-May because I felt that tech stocks and especially growth stocks like Palantir were getting way too disrespected. So I purchased it around here, and if you take a look, you could see that when the stock just IPO'd and just started trading, so around September 30th, October 1st, you could have scooped it up for like $9. And that's insane because if you scooped it up for $9, just a couple of months later, you will be sitting at 450% profit. But this was just like for a day. Around mid-January, end of January, stocks were flying, things were flying, growth stocks were doing really well, and so there was a boom here. And ever since then, there's been a huge sell-off. It went all the way down to $17. So from $45, it ran all the way down to $17. So it's been quite a roller coaster ride to be invested in Palantir. And this is why, if you know why you're invested, if you believe in the company, then you have conviction. You don't get shaken out on these ups and downs. This is a type of company that if I was going into, and this is just personal opinion, not financial advice, I would go into it for the long term on a dip. I wouldn't buy this and trade off of it on news and stuff because it's very unpredictable, and honestly, no one really knows where Palantir is moving to. They're an ever-evolving beast. Their AI is super innovative, and so I think it's going to be a whole different company a couple of years from now. I believe the capabilities of their AI to be much more useful, much more effective, and to be a whole different beast than what Palantir is today. Now, I also want to point out that there's clearly resistance levels around this mark right here. So around the $28 to $30 mark, you're going to see a lot of resistance once Palantir tries to break through those. And we could see that a clear support line is around $21. So it's very possible that Palantir is just going to bounce around over here. But I believe that after it rips through $30, it can go and see all-time highs. And I believe that to happen within a year's time. So now let's glance at some of the basic fundamentals. So currently the market cap of Palantir is $47.66 billion. So if we look at the quarterly financial performance, you can see that it's nothing super impressive. Year over year, you'll notice that it's much better revenue, but you won't really notice that it's much better income. However, if we take a look at the annual, we see a whole different picture. We can see that their net income is actually going down quite a bit, but their revenue is going way up. And remember, expanding companies, innovative companies, you want them to spend on growing. And so for growth stocks, this isn't so much of a concern about their profitability yet. I think that a company that's innovative like this, that is just gaining customers, and it tells a lot of its customers, look, use our system for very, very cheap, even free at some points, and then they go ahead and they sign them up to a subscription revenue model, which then later on translates to recurring revenue and does really, really well for the company. And of course, the reason that we don't see a PE ratio yet is because the company is not yet profitable, so technically the PE ratio is infinite. So I just want you to glance back at this chart once more, because I want to show that a stock like this went from $9 to $45 rather quickly. So there can be wild swings here. And just because we're trading at $25 does not mean that we cannot shoot up to way past $45 in only several months' time. So personally for me, I'm going to hold this long term. I see a lot more reasons that it's going to be a success and a very profitable holding in my portfolio versus it being a dud and a loss.
So if you made it to this part of the video, congratulations. It means you made it through all my ramblings. You didn't fall asleep. You didn't quit. You struggled through. Hopefully you learned something. Again, I'm trying to learn with the rest of you. Doing due diligence, doing research on these stocks, on these companies, it's making me a better investor and just a more well-rounded businessman. And it helps me to have conviction in the positions that I hold. And I hold true to the strategies because I'm putting it out there and I want to stick to my word. So I really appreciate you. If this video helped you learn something, then please help me out by liking the video, commenting on it, and subscribing. And if you want, hit that notification bell. I made it super sustainable. It's environmentally friendly. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you know when I put out new videos, so that it's not just up to the YouTube algorithm gods to show you that I put out a new video. I appreciate you guys. I'm really trying to hit that 10,000 subscriber mark before the end of the year. And I really hope that you guys can help me do that. So I'll see you guys in the next video.